Will Florida State get its way? This, I believe, is going to come down to legal power and financial power, and we will see how the battle wages here in the upcoming weeks, months, and who knows, maybe beyond that. Welcome to Seminoles Live right here at the Voice of College Football. Appreciate you all stopping by. Leave those comments and questions there. Consider contributing as well financially and in any other way. You can at least hit that like button and join us for the next 90 minutes, a little special edition here. Thanks to this guy, Tony Syracuse, is stopping by from Last Word on College Football to kick it all off. We're in the midst, of course, of National Signing Day 1 week away. Bowl game to be played, not a college football playoff. Sorry, Florida State fans, of course. We empathize with you. Transfer portal and all the things going on with every program across the country, Tony. But with Florida State, there's a lot of long-range endeavors to be pursued, apparently.
Yeah, Mark, there really are. And obviously it started with Florida State being left out of the college football playoffs. And, that's a debate that will go on, well, until next year when there are 12 teams. and it'll be a lot less of an argument unless Florida State is 13th. There's a lot of discussion about legal ramifications, the state attorney general talking about, making demands, Congress or Senator Rick Scott making demands of the football playoff committee and demanding transparency. Look, I'm not happy with what happened to Florida State. I don't like the way it happened. I think that there's a lot we can discuss about the process. I was on all of those conference calls with the playoff committee, and there's a lot that I don't like. Is it worth a United States senator getting involved in making demands of an independent playoff committee? You're not going to get anywhere with it. It's it's futility. Is it worth the state attorney general getting involved? That seems to be a path a lot are taking lately, right? When James Madison was going to be left out of the New Year's Six games, the Virginia state attorney general was going to make demands. When there have been probably 3 or 4 instances this year alone where state attorneys general, and please note, because I've seen it far too many times when people were covering the West Virginia ruling today on transfers, the plural of attorney general is attorneys general, journalists, media people. It is not attorney generals. Stop it. Go back to journalism school or get an editor, one or the other. But we've seen that a lot this year. And does it go anywhere? No, it doesn't, because there is no jurisdiction for a state attorney general over the college football playoff committee. You have no jurisdiction to make these demands. So it goes nowhere. The next question, which we're going to lead to, I see this already.
There's this thing
I
called
knew that was going to get a reaction.
No, it's got nothing to do with the Florida State, right or wrong. It's
right.
Are you familiar with the Redskins case where they?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
There's this thing called discovery. You've heard of this,
right? Absolutely.
How did John Gruden get fired?
Right.
So then then you know these things, and you're saying these things, but you know what the reason why, and you know what the pressure puts on it, and you know as a journalist what they don't want is antitrust, and they don't want things being subpoenaed. So what I'm saying is, you know these things without me telling you that. So it's a little bit of playing on words when you know why they're pushing this. And it's not to change it.
I know why they're pushing it, and the discovery will be embarrassing to the committee. There's no question about it.
It would completely what it will do is, if it gets to that, it will definitely put a very, because it's not that we talked about it the other day. It's not a playoff committee. It's an invitational, and that's what
absolutely
needs to be, but that's not what was said. What was
look.
said is that this, and so that's why you have to put as much things out there. And really, it's an end game. The end game isn't to mess up the college football playoff. We all know what the end game is. We started this season off talking about what the end game is. The end game is now you're putting Boo in a bad situation because he's the chairman. You're putting the ACC in a bad position because they didn't fight for it. So you're making every case for Florida State for what they really want to do, and to not have a lot of this stuff come out. Because if they don't sue them, they won't get out of the GOR. They won't get out of the conference. So we know there's an end game in it. It's not to give Florida State the national championship this year. That won't happen.
Right.
But it is for the opportunity, because if this is the case, Florida State can run the table every year and not get into the college football invitational, which is a waste of time.
You gave me a lot to work with. That's why I love Big Game James, man. He's always got it going. Look, the difference with the Redskins and those issues is there is oversight of the NFL because of some antitrust exemptions, limited antitrust exemptions that they've been given, which means Congress got involved at some point with the NFL and therefore has very limited oversight. You hit a big phrase though, and that is the antitrust part, because the half of the things that the NCAA does right now, whether it's the transfer portal, NIL, whatever, are a violation of the Sherman Antitrust Act, which will ultimately in the years to come be what brings down the NCAA. That having been said, I agree with you that this is about embarrassing the committee, embarrassing the ACC, humiliating Boo Corrigan. Look, Mark, I am not a conspiracy theorist. I don't, there wasn't another shooter on the grassy knoll in Dallas. We really did land on the moon. It wasn't just, on a movie set. I'm not a conspiracy theorist. But if you were to connect some dots, there are dots to connect. When Stanford, Cal, and SMU were being pitched to the ACC, there were not enough yes votes to get them in, right? But what was happening? Florida State, through all of this and for the last year, has talked loudly and openly about its unhappiness with the ACC, its unhappiness with the financial dealings. I have backed their unhappiness. It is insanity that Rutgers is now making twice as much on its TV deal as Florida State or Clemson. It's ridiculous. The grant of rights is ridiculous. That having been said, who finally greased the skids to get Florida State to leave if they wanted to? Boo Corrigan, because he got his administration at North Carolina State to flip that vote, become the deciding yes vote to get SMU and Cal and Stanford in, so that the ACC was protected in the amount of teams they had should Florida State and others wish to leave. Now, who, excuse my language, but for all intents and purposes, screws Florida State with the playoff committee? It's Boo Corrigan's committee. There are dots that can be connected. And oh, by the way, who was the ACC commissioner who brought Florida State into the conference? Boo's dad, Gene. There's a whole 6 degrees of separation with Boo Corrigan here, which is really pretty unseemly. I grant you all of that. I grant you the playoff committee did a horrible job in a lot of things. The fact that Liberty is ranked ahead of SMU, when on the conference call on that Sunday, Boo Corrigan admitted, yeah, Liberty didn't really play anybody, but they went undefeated. Well, wait a second. Florida State's undefeated, and you just took them out of the conversation. So what the heck, Boo? And it basically told all the G5 schools, hey, don't bother scheduling anybody. Take the Liberty path. just don't schedule anyone hard, go undefeated, and you'll get the nod over a team like SMU, who lost to 2 top 12 teams, along the way. There was so much that they did wrong. They were wrong. Look, I was in the press box at the ACC championship game, Bank of America Stadium in Charlotte, and there were a bunch of us sitting there watching the game saying, this is sadly giving the committee what they wanted. This sludge of a game, which frankly, I thought Florida State's defense was spectacular that night. I thought it was so impressive. But you could hear the other people in the press box, some of the national media, talking about, oh, this is going to kill Florida State. I'm like, man, it shouldn't.
Which is ironic, because if you watch at the same time, if you watch the Iowa Michigan,
right, which I had on my tablet next to my laptop in the press box,
which is the problem, and therein lies all of the issues. Mm-hmm. And this is why I always tell people, as a guy who's been deposed, mm-hmm. and is currently going through a civil suit, mm-hmm. this is why they'll get picked apart. And sometimes I say this about Kirk, and I just tweeted at him. I was like, sometimes when you talk too much, you forget what you say. Uh-huh. And these guys literally have said even the idea, and if I were to use their metric, what they mm-hmm. said in the last one, mm-hmm. Florida State is not good enough to be a top 4 team because mm-hmm. they have lost because their offense is just not good enough. Mm-hmm. Let's say I agree to that. So it's better than Georgia, who's lost one game. So you rank where you rank them makes absolutely no sense to what you said. Mm-hmm. And then the real thing, and this is where, again, why I do believe they'll win and I'll have a case, is because somebody told somebody something. There's one people that know everything. That's Vegas. There is no way that Florida State went from an 85% chance per Vegas on Saturday evening when all games concluded, and Alabama had a 15% chance to a coin flip by 8 a.m. Nothing changed. So as the attorney one of the guys that I'm going with the stuff is, we were not able to present the information that he wanted fast enough, so he believes that something's there. Mm-hmm. So when there is something there like this, you have to understand it's the reason why the attorney general worded it the way she worded it.
Sure.
She didn't word it like she worded it in the manner in which you're going to present this information over. And all it takes for college football to be destroyed is to have the was it the Black Sox scandal that mm-hmm. we had in baseball? Mm-hmm. All it takes is that. And do you want the intent over something that kind of will be changed next year, but based upon what your wording is, not yours, but the college football committee,
right?
Next year, if we take the top 12 teams, what's not the same in the top 12? That's right, the rankings as of right now. All those teams that are in the top 12, what 2 conferences will they be in? Right. So say Florida State is the 12th team next year, mm-hmm. and they're an undefeated conference champion. Mm-hmm. But yet, the Big Ten and the SEC are considered to be the 2 power. So again, the problem, and this is when people keep saying, I don't understand why they're raising a fuss. It's literally the way that America was made. Somebody has to raise the fuss for everybody else, or call it what it is. We have this in basketball every year, the Big Ten SEC Challenge. Mm-hmm. Just call it the Big Ten SEC Challenge in football, and nobody will be mad. Don't put on a masquerade that this is a national competition between all the Power 5 conferences and the G5 when this is just absolutely not true.
So let me play devil's advocate to a certain extent, because I think both of you know, James certainly does, what my stance is on this. That Florida State got screwed, that mm-hmm. they earned a playoff spot. So let's take that out of it. Mm-hmm. Kirk Herbstreit made some comments today, and the one place where I can certainly back him up is that he's an analyst and he's just asked who are the 4 best teams in the country. And that's certainly his prerogative to say that Florida State's the 20th best team in the country, regardless of their record. That should have no impact. It should have no impact on the committee. All right. unless there is some collusion that can be found, unless there are some unsavory tactics that are behind the Iron Curtain, whether that's SEC and ESPN, whatever those dots that could be connected, possibly. If that's in play, that's a whole other deal. But if it can be proven, or if it can't be proven that the committee is acting in some unsavory way, if they're just making decisions based on who they believe are the 4 best teams in the country, I don't know how this can be challenged.
Well, the guy with big ears that has the little ear pods, what's his name? Paul Feinbaum. Again, this is why I say, Mark, the biggest problem in all of this is these guys keep talking. And they keep, like Paul Feinbaum literally said, it's our job to influence. You're using that. The SEC, the ESPN saves $150 million by Alabama being in there. They
can say that, but unless somebody can prove that that's having an impact.
But what I'm saying is, if there's $150 million savings by moving a team into the situation, and you're doing something unprecedented, and numerous people who are part of the network that saves the money saying this, I put it like this. I wouldn't want them to be, if I don't have anything, I would turn my phone over. But I probably wouldn't want that, because because the only thing with civil, the thing we're talking about, so it's the difference between criminal and civil. Criminal is innocent until proven guilty without a shadow of a doubt. Civil is, all I have to do is prove that there's enough smoke that there has to be a fire. And even if you go to the jury, you do not have. And what the problem is that no person can sit here and say, damn, you know what? That is a lot. Even if they're upstanding, which they could be. But if I ask you for it, you'll never tell me, which is why I have to sue. And if they were transparent, easiest way to get rid of all of this, open up the books. We televise everything else. Everything is reality TV. We see locker room. What is it? Hard Knocks. You get a chance to see what it's like in the locker room. People are amazed when we mic up players. Oh my God, they're so vulgar. Show us the committee minutes. You do an hour special every week. Just do a Monday night. Here is the committee meeting. We do it. Everybody's local broadcasting has city council meetings put up. It's not something that's outside of what Americans do. The problem is, anytime you put something behind closed doors and then you have something unprecedented happen, because this is what the key is. There has never been, including the BCS, an undefeated Power 5 champion excluded for a one loss in what was it, 30 years? And then you use the example that everybody uses is a terrible example. TCU, the same TCU that beat Michigan, that won a game in the college football playoff. Like, we're now saying that, oh, well, we don't want another TCU. TCU didn't just luck into the national. They beat Michigan, who, by the way, what happened to Michigan the year before when they played Georgia? Didn't they get pummeled by Georgia, if I remember correctly? So we don't want another TCU, but we want another Michigan. The problem isn't in the decision. It's in what they said led to the decision and the unprecedented nature. And the problem is civilly, not criminally, because nobody committed any crimes. Civilly, you said that this is what we're doing. So everybody's participating in a manner in which it's done. So there's a case. But we all know that I know why I wouldn't want it to go to trial. I don't want something crazy that I don't want nobody else that I done said about somebody. I don't want to be John Gruden. That's what I wouldn't want. And it's always interesting when those guys get in the room. But the key is they could just right now just say, hey, here are the minutes of what we did and how we got to it. And we could legitimately dead all of this. Just release the minutes.
So before I allow Tony to cut loose on that, I'll just make 2 quick comments. One would be that I think aren't necessarily, I won't call them aces in the hole, but there's something close to that the committee has. One would be that while everything is true what you said about TCU and could be said about Cincinnati and some other selections, what can also be said is that they've made selections in the past that were not good financial selections. Cincinnati was not a good financial selection. TCU was not a good financial selection. So they can make a history behind making other selections that were not good financial selections. The other one would be the injury factor with Jordan Travis. It is written in the criteria, and it's been in play ever since year one. And there's really only one time that it's come up and been a major component of the selection, and that was a whole different situation in year one. So they do have that defense of, look at this team offensively. We're making judgment calls here, and it's not about just the record. We just don't select the best records. Although their 9-year history before that is they've never jumped. Yes, a better record had a lesser record jump. So that is unprecedented, both undefeated, and they have just never simply jumped a team with a worse record over another Power 5 with a better record. That's never happened in 10 years, except for this. So there's certainly a case on the Florida State side, but just drawing to the committee's defense there is an injury component, and they have made selections in the past that were not financial gains for the college football playoff.
Let me take that injury point to an issue, because, and here's where nailing down the committee, as James wants and all the Florida State fans want, is going to be difficult. Is because they talked out of their rear ends for much of the process. All right. When Jordan Travis got hurt, the following week, Florida State was still number 4. If you were going to bump them down because you were concerned about the injury, that was the time to do it. And in full transparency, I was on other shows advocating that Washington should have been moved up to number 4 at that point, mostly because Washington had played and beaten more top 25 teams than Florida State had at that point. But if you're going to take the injury into account, you can't wait until the final Sunday to use that as a rationale for why you move someone. You've got to move them along the process with the injury. That would have been the time to do it, which was 2 to 3 weeks before the final decision. The fact that you kept them at number 4 for much of that time and then bumped them down because of the injury, using the injury just doesn't work for me at all. Yes, it is in their criteria. Absolutely. They have absolutely every right to do it. They misused it, and they used it at the wrong time, and therefore their use of it really lacks credibility for me.
You're right. I've made the same point on other videos.
It would be crazy if we had an example of a quarterback of a team having an injured quarterback winning a national championship. It's like, has it ever happened before?
But the difference is we have that quarterback prove that they could be an outstanding offense against a quality team, and we didn't have that here.
Fair. Top 15. So if Ohio State were to be the top 15 ranked team, they would be considered pretty good. Oh, Louisville was 14 with an amazing offense that got held to the lowest offensive output they ever had. Now, without even going into that, with the third string quarterback that would not be playing in the playoff game in the month, by the way, they had a better offensive output than the team you put in the playoff that was fully healthy.
Mm-hmm.
It's the problem is the rationale you use for one and the standards you hold one to, you're not holding everybody else to, because that means, and who knows what could have happened at the end of the month. We've seen Alabama have a quarterback mess up their ankle, have a specific type of surgery, and come back and play. That means if Jordan Travis would have played that game, you'd think we would have mercy ruled. Which, again, you can't play what ifs in those situations. Which
the committee did. I think the committee, I got to be honest with you, I think the committee thought they were going to get let off the hook when they saw that, that Brock Glenn was going to be the quarterback for that game. Because I was there, and Tate Rodemaker went out and went into pregame warmups, full uniform, helmet on, went and threw, and we were all thinking he was going to play. And then when the team came out, he wasn't with them. He came out about 5 minutes later in street clothes, stood on the sideline. We were all watching that. And my suspicion was the committee thinks they just got let off the hook. They think Louisville's going to take care of the business for them, and they don't have to worry about it. And so then when they got backed into a corner on Sunday, you pull the Jordan Travis injury card, and here it's in, bylaw, whatever, page 8, paragraph 3, when they hadn't used it previously in this particular circumstance. So they got back to him into a corner and they looked like idiots.
And again,
I got to tell you real quickly, not to interrupt, James, I got to tell you real quickly, I was on a show the day after this, the playoff committee announcements. And just so you know, my solution to it was to blow up the entire committee and start over. Get rid of all of them, every single one of them. I know that there are former players, there's ADs, there's all this. Get rid of all of them and start over before you start the next playoff rounds. My challenge with this is, look, I get it. You want to embarrass the committee. You want answers. You want transparency. You want to go through the discovery process. We all know that the wheels of justice in this country creak as they move. They do not move quickly. They do not move expeditiously, especially when they're the only clear fix for this is money. You're going to say, here's how much we lost out on by not being in that group before, because that is the only remedy you have available to you at this point. They're not going to put you in the playoffs.
No, they're not going to put us in the playoffs. I'm with you.
So that's it. You got money. You got money. You got money,
Or-
and you got transparency from the committee, and those are good things. But the point is, it's going to be a year down the road before you see any of it, and so much is going to change. Florida State won't even be in the ACC by then. They'll have already announced they're moving on. So, and the judge is going to look at that and say, how much damage do you really have? They're going to look at how much damage you really suffered, and you suffered some, but it's going to be mitigated to some degree.
I'm one of the few people who is going to just tell you that the real it's an end game in all of this. It could really be done overnight. Fox and ESPN could go in a back room right now and end this entire thing if they wanted to. They're getting the clicks. They got to juice this for what it's worth. Heck, we all getting the clicks. Mark, you're probably going to get a spike in views on this show. Everybody's shows are doing great right now. But they're going to juice this for all it's worth. But they could just go in and say, all right, we're going to let ACC out. We're going to let Florida State out of this. We're going to put them in on Fox or vice versa or SEC, whatever they want to, whatever the case may be, because Florida State is realizing outside of being in the playoff every year, you can't have guys, one team, like for example, Florida can't be making $85-90 million a year without before they even put a ball on the ground, and you're making 45-50.
Mm-hmm.
Like you'll never sit back and be okay with that. Like that's never going to be okay.
And you're right. And Mark knows I have been Don Quixote with this, tilting at windmills, that the grant of rights, this lovely document right here, the grant of rights is a travesty, because I get why they did it when they did it. I get why Commissioner Swofford did it to save the conference, blah, 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 blah. The fact that schools signed away their rights until 2036 is unreal. There are ways out of it. Part of the problem is that Florida State, at the time they want out of it, is also going to be boxed in with only one path. You can't claim conspiracy with the committee and ESPN and then expect to be able to be welcomed into the SEC which is essentially run by ESPN.
Well, that's not who we want. We definitely don't want to be in
No,
the SEC.
you want the
and
Big
I don't
Ten.
think the SEC wants us in particular. Yeah.
Well,
but,
maybe not. But let me tell you, the easier path to get out of the ACC would be to go to the SEC, because ESPN owning the ACC network and the SEC network could help smooth that path for you financially and help ease your way out. The way this is going to happen now is going to be extraordinarily litigious.
mm-hmm.
And Mark knows I painted this absurd path months ago as to how Florida State gets out. And while I sit here and say I want the politicians out of it, there is a way to do it. And it is for Florida State to purposely and purposefully violate the grant of rights and force a lawsuit. And then have the Florida State legislature indemnify them against breach of contract lawsuits. There is a precedent for it. The state of Texas protected Texas Tech in the matter of Mike Leach versus Texas Tech University and indemnified the school and all of its public schools within its jurisdiction against breach of contract lawsuits. It really only pertained to the Mike Leach lawsuit, but the state of Florida could do it, and it will indemnify.
Actually have that kind of. Basically, you can only, like for example, if something happened to me on Florida State's campus, I can only sue Florida State for X amount of dollars. I can't go for the full. So
right. There's a cat. Right. There's a cap. There's a tortious lawsuit cap on it. This is going to be different though, because it's going to be contractual. It's going to be for a breach of contract instead of, a tortious lawsuit. So you need the indemnity from the state of Florida. I feel quite certain the state of Florida would do it. The Florida State legislature would do it. And it gets you out of the grant of rights because it nullifies. This is an important part, very important part. There is something in this grant of rights that should be in there that is not. And it's severely lacking, and it could cost the ACC, Florida State, and other teams. It's called a choice of law provision. All right. If you want to sue your credit card company, you look at your credit card statement or your agreement when you signed up for it. It tells you have to sue them in the state of Delaware because that's where they're incorporated. You want to sue your moving company like we did. It turns out they're all in the state of Florida, or they're all registered in the state of Florida. You got to sue them in Florida. There is no choice of law clause in the grant of rights. You are free to take that litigation to whatever state you want. So you do it in the state of Florida, then you have this Florida legislature indemnify Florida State against the lawsuit, and you are out. You are on your way to the Big Ten and Fox and whatever else. I've spoken to lawyers who are fully aware of it and have already been in the ears of the Florida State administration about it, that there is a path to do it. You basically have to blatantly violate the grant of rights and open up negotiations with the Big Ten and Fox and whomever else.
Who knows? One thing I do know about Alford is Alford doesn't make statements and doesn't make moves, doesn't say things unless there are things moving. I'll give him that. I'm on that front, but I will say this. This is the one thing that I've been petitioning, and which I thought, once I looked at it, I had no idea that the coaches poll and the AP poll are not under any force to identify the winner of the college football invitational as the national champion.
Correct.
And as I was telling Florida State fans, those are the two that matter. Like when you look at USC's national champions, one of their co-national, they were AP in one. The BCS was under obligation to select the BCS champion as the coaches poll champion. That's why I tell them, go out, beat a really good Georgia team, regardless of who's declared and who's hit the transfer portal. It's a brand. You're undefeated in the SEC regardless, which I like. Kirby Smart is a hell of a ball coach. And I've said this, I think I said this on this show, Mark. when we were looking like it, I don't want to be 1 or 4 because I figured if we were 1 or 4, that puts me up against Georgia. I want Washington because I've seen what Washington can do against the Washington states of the world, the Oregon states. I've seen what they've done against lesser teams. Even though I will give them props, they did beat a significant amount of top 25 teams. I've also seen our defense not give up. I think 4 touchdown passes all year. I like our chances, but I don't want to play. I didn't want to play Georgia. Not in the first game. I didn't want 30 days for Kirby Smart to break down something. This was also before Jordan Travis was injured. But I think we're in an interesting time, though, that you've got to – the only thing more American than apple pie is change happening when your pockets are tapped. The only way change happens is with the threatening of losing money or sanctions or things of that nature. So, I'm like I said, I'm not opposed to it. The only reason I think Florida State fans consistently, because it's still relatively new. And 2, you've got people openly getting on their big platforms and poking the bear, like Kirk Herbstreit, they're giving Kirk the business. But this ain't the first bad take that Kirk's ever had before. When I don't like something, I just hit mute. Just push mute. Like Twitter is really easy. Facebook's a little more difficult. Instagram is impossible. Like you can't mute. You have to not look at your IG. But Kirk is going out calling people epitaph. I'm not epitaph. Excuse me. That's not true. Calling people slurs. A female dog, and saying people are doing these different things. And I'm fine for the talking trash. Just don't be surprised by the backlash. Paul Feinbaum is, calling it faux outrage, and this is no slight on you, Tony, but if I told Paul I'll give up on this when he gives up on his hair. I'm going to fight for this as hard as he's fighting for the hair on the sides, and that's okay. That's everybody's American right.
Sure,
do what you do, but if you keep going on your show, that's why I say really. Part of me believes, at worst, this was just something that was well played to be able to. This is generating a ton of talk. It's been every time I turn on ESPN, it's what people are talking about. They're talking about it on Twitter. They're talking about it on podcasts. Rivals are saying, "Get over it." Everybody else is doing these different things, and I'm like, and get over it in the sense of if you were in the same situation. You would not be. You would be fighting just as hard and hoping that other people would listen to you. But you're right. Nothing changes this year.
In the event that there is litigation, the attorneys at ESPN would have done well already to tell Kirk to shut up, stop answering people's tweets, tell Feinbaum, you've already done 8 shows about this, move on. There's other college football stuff, other college sports stuff to talk about. The attorneys at ESPN would have done well to advise their on-air talent to stop talking about it at this point, stop responding to people, stop talking about it, and just move on and move along, because anything you say is going to be part of the discovery process at this point.
My question to ask you is, we see what happens when you go undefeated in the ACC. If I'm Clemson, it'll never happen for Miami. We've been hoping this for 30. They've won 1 championship in 30 years. We've been praying for this. The original reason we brought them in was to have this happen, but okay, fine. Forget. We'll use Miami. They could come back and we use Miami if they go undefeated or lose 1 game. What is why stay when it doesn't seem like there's any fight? And regardless of what Florida State did, this costs everybody in the conference money. We're still doing the bowl revenue split, correct?
Correct.
So
it is costing everybody in the conference money. There's the new, I don't remember the phrase Jim Phillips used, but it's a disproportionate distribution, that those who play in those postseason games get the bulk of it, and then the rest gets spread out. So it's no longer completely even distribution. Nonetheless, it is costing the in other words, if Florida State had made the playoffs, they get the lion's share of it, and then the remaining percentage goes to everybody else. But
here's what would have
the
happened.
Conference and everybody else.
Here's what my point was: is that the SC, so Florida State goes to the playoff.
Mm-hmm.
We get two teams. We'll just call them all New Year's Six, just playoff and the other one. Louisville would have got the automatic buy-in.
Yep.
Instead, because of your cowardice, we have one school. SEC has 4.
Mm-hmm.
We know for a fact, if remove Alabama from this, if Georgia were a one-loss SEC champion, and their one loss was out of conference, SEC would still be beating the table. We know the ACC team wouldn't have got in. Big 12, we won't even know what the Big 12 will be, but the not beating of the table, what does that do for the confidence of everybody else in the ACC? Because I think one of the things that's being missed, and I get it, amongst all the bitching and the hoorah and all this other stuff, is that a conference champion of a Power 5 was literally left out. And if that Louisville could have been that, anybody else could have been that. What do you think the other teams in the conference are thinking?
Well, let me answer that with a question. What was different that was supposed to be happening this year in the postseason? We were supposed to be at 12 teams already, and who killed it? Jim Phillips, Kevin Warren, and George Kliavkoff with the Alliance. They killed it. They formed a voting block, which was, for all the things that the Alliance never did, the one thing it did accomplish was it created a voting block to combat Greg Sankey's, omnipotent power throughout college sports. And it pushed back the 12-team playoff another year because it was supposed to start this year. A lot of this sits on Jim Phillips' shoulders and his poor management as commissioner of the ACC. So the other schools who are going to miss some of this revenue, millions of revenue, are upset at the playoff committee. They're upset at Jim Phillips. They're upset at the ACC. There's a lot of sorry for using this phrase, but there's a lot of pissiness to go around from these schools, and appropriately so. And if you're one of the others in the conference, all right, if you're Virginia, if you're Wake Forest, if you're NC State, if you're UNC this year, you're pretty upset, because that money is extremely important to you. You are not the darling of the networks, Clemson, Florida State, even Miami. You're not on everybody's must-watch list, depending upon what the other games are that week. That money goes a long way, and you now don't have it. I have talked to I called 3 coaches, but talked to 2 because one didn't return my call, but who are in that second tier of schools in the ACC, and they're pretty pissed off, not just at the committee, but at Jim Phillips and, at others as well, that this is the way it turned out. It may have only been $3, $4, $5 million loss. That's a lot of money to some of these schools in the football program. So there's a lot of rancor to go around.
Although in a sense, I was just going to say, in a sense, those schools can only be so mad at the ACC because they just want the conference to continue, because they don't have the outs and the paths that the top tier teams, they just want to continue.
They don't have other conferences knocking on their door.
So their $39 million per year is just fine with them. They would just like to maximize that. And I'll just
which is the point. like, which is the reason why. So when people are like, why does Florida State want out of the ACC? You just said why Florida State wants out of the ACC.
Sure. Yeah. Oh, I don't blame them for wanting out. I'd be beating down the door to get out also. Mark knows, because I keep showing it, and Mark and I keep talking about it. This grant of rights is horrible. It is the fact that anyone gets locked in for 20 plus years to the rights, the ownership of their TV contract is just unimaginable.
But in Phillips' defense, too, again, there's 11 teams right now. We have the 12-team playoff.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Oklahoma would be an odd man out because they would have to take one G5 champion. So that would be Liberty.
Right.
Liberty and Florida State are the only ones that would not be in the Big Ten of the SEC.
No,
so
absolutely. Look, we can call it the power. Well, it's not even a Power 5 anymore. Farewell to the Pac-12. It was fun while it lasted. The reality is, right now, in terms of the power brokers of the conference of college football in particular, it is a Power 2. It is the Big Ten and the SEC. The Big 12 and the ACC are trying to stake their claim, and they're being loud, and they're doing all of these different things to support their schools. But right now, it is Tony Petitti and Greg Sankey's world, and they're making the rules right now.
And I think that's the reason why we need that on wax. Mm-hmm. We need that on the Bible. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth? Like, we need the thing that we all know, the peculiar situation. We need that actually verbally expressed and said, so that we all know, okay, so now again, so when people say, why do we need to do these things? We need it said. So now a judge is going to look like, well, what are the ways to get into the Big Ten, SEC? Nobody really wants all of these things done. That's why, again, Florida State is in the situation where just give us what we want, or we will burn this thing down. And the crazy part is, we got a governor that's crazy enough to really do this. And he sits there for 2 more years. And there's probably going to be another one that follows him that's just like this. So, like, for all of our sanity, if we don't want this, please just find a better way. That's all. My bad, Mark.
No, you're good. George, appreciate you being here. This is George Georgitis, of course, the Renegade Report. George, we'll let you chime in since you were the next one on board.
Yeah, no, I kind of caught the tail end of that one, and like, hey, I get it, man. If Duke's okay with their $39 million, and that's kind of goes back to the whole negotiations and Florida State giving the ACC a chance the past couple of years to try to work something out. It's like, if you're okay with less, then let's do the unequal revenue sharing. Let Florida State get their 15%, and everybody's happy. But they decided they wanted to just let ACC die to prove a point, and so it is what it is. At this point, it's a Power 2. I agree with what he said.
Although the Big 12, even though it's a Power 2, the Big 12 is at least stabilized. Mm-hmm. They have their
as a group of conference.
Yes, so they're going to have at least 1 seat at the table for every college football playoff, if not 2. And they will be okay in that fashion. They will make money. Their games are going to be on national television. They'll make money. They may not be nationally competitive. I don't see any of those programs competing for a national championship, even though they have a entry into the playoff. But one point to be made, and then clarification, and then one question for Tony. One would be that we talked about the distribution at one point being equal of postseason play, and then there was a change made. And I remember when that came down, that was in late May, but I'm not finding the details weren't released. So we don't know how disproportionate that distribution is. We just know that they've addressed it.
Correct.
So I don't know where that stands.
Yeah, a minuscule drop in the bucket compared to what Florida State was talking about as far as what would keep us in the conference. Like,
sure, absolutely.
They did do something, but
the pie's still too small. Regardless,
we need 15%. Period. If we're staying in, then we need 15% of that pie.
It was Jim Phillips sticking a Band-Aid on a gaping wound.
Sure.
Just to try and appease Florida State and Clemson and, the top tier of the conference until other things, rolled along.
Now, we've had these conversations in the past, Tony, for months and months and months concerning the
Mhm.
grant of rights and a number of different, whether at the time they seemed like reasonable or viable paths to getting out of the grant of rights. Uh, but couldn't one backlash be, or one counter argument be, well, you signed this agreement and it
Absolutely.
states everything about, you knew that there would be a fear of everything escalating around
Mhm.
you, and you still signed. If we see it all the time, athletes trade sometimes immediate money for long-term security. So you kind of made that trade. I'm thinking, what on the other side, Florida State could say, what were our options at the time?
Well, and that language is in there, and that's why people think we're going to be able to get out of this thing finally, because they have to be competitive. That was in there. They had to be a reasonably competitive with the money, get into playoffs and stuff. With us getting left out and undefeated and everything else, there's a chance we can get out of that sucker. I'm no lawyer, so I'm not that qualified to talk about it. But there is language in there that the conference has to be competitive and ESPN has to be competitive somewhat with the money. And when it goes to 80 to 40, whatever the crazy split is. Yeah, that's how they'll find their way out.
Yeah, there is a phrase on page 1, actually, in which the conference says that it is the responsibility of the ACC to promote financial competitiveness and maintain it for all parties involved. Well, as we've discussed before, when Rutgers is making 80 million a year and Florida State's making 40 million, you're not competitive. And there's not a lot that the SEC can do to change that, quite frankly, or the ACC rather can do to change it. Because if you're ESPN, why would you renegotiate this deal? You're getting this conference at a sweetheart rate. You're getting it at 50 cents on the dollar. So to your point, Mark, to your question a few minutes ago, yes, that will be the ACC's defense in the litigation is, hey, y'all signed it and you all knew it was through 2036. That's on you.
Especially when your major source of revenue is a national TV contract, and
Correct.
that coincided the signing of a national TV contract. So
Mhm.
where did any of these schools think that this increase in revenue was going to come from?
There is no reasonable measure by which anyone could have looked at this in 2013 and said, well, this is, look, the schools were foolish. Everybody was foolish, because when we're talking about media, and we've talked about this when it came to the Pac-12 deal that, back in 2011 or whenever it was signed, 2012 was the biggest media deal in the history of college sports, but it was a 10-year deal. And the rest of the world passed them by somewhere around year 6 or 7. The rest of the sports world has passed the ACC by. If the ACC lives with this and everybody has to stay in place and the ACC stays as is because of the grant of rights, no offense to any of the schools, but you're going to be the MAC financially is what you're going to be. You're going to be making the same amount of money as the MAC schools at that point. Congratulations. It is a viable defense for the ACC to say you signed it. There will be the argument that there were unforeseen circumstances, which was new TV deals and so on. But
That's a horrible defense.
Oh, it's a terrible defense.
Well, the problem
anybody with half a brain knows that when the TV contracts come up, that the Big Ten and the SEC were going to make so much more money.
Sure. But the point is that there is a competitive nature clause in the contract, tells you that the ACC had a responsibility that we don't know. There's no indication that the ACC has ever gone back to ESPN to ask to renegotiate the deal based on any of these factors. They're just writing it out. Jim Phillips, time and time again, and again, this was not his document. This was Swofford's document when he was commissioner, but Phillips inherited it, and he brings it up time and time again. ACC media days, when I'm there, badgering him with questions, that we're really happy the grant of rights will hold everybody together. He embraces it because it is his only hope of holding everyone together. The minute the grant of rights is opened up in any capacity, the conference is over. There's going to be
thing that anybody who signed a contract,
shifting, and there's going to be moving. The bottom half is going to, become a bunch of G5 schools, and it'll be a very short tenure at that point for Commissioner Phillips.
Why can't it be a 10-team conference that's better than any other G5 conference? Wouldn't it just become?
It can be, but when it opens up, you're going to have ESPN coming in and saying, we want to lower the financial threshold we're willing to pay. And the question will be, will those remaining 10 schools, Virginia and Boston College and Syracuse, are they going to be all good with it? To me, you would have to be, because you don't have a lot of other options. If you're Wake Forest, where else are you going to go? Right. But it will be intrinsically damaging to the conference financially.
One thing about contracts, all contracts are meant to be broken.
Sure they are.
Including TV deals.
Sure they are.
And one of the things that if Florida State were to join the Big Ten or the SEC, that would be another media entity added to it, which would also bring you to the renegotiation table to be able to see what you're doing, because you're adding in a new market. So upon adding a West Coast market, which you never had before, into the ACC, you didn't even, and a Midwest market, you didn't even beat the table. So, and then also during the time that you signed since the GOR was signed and other things have done, we had this thing called a nationwide shutdown, in which you did have somebody by the gonads, and you allowed somebody to come in and participate and then leave when they wanted to. So the problem with all of those different things is that somebody could clearly say is that as whoever the commissioner was, doesn't matter. The ACC as an entity did not do what was necessary, because this could, again, the ACC can easily make itself one of the strongest conferences by forcing Notre Dame's hand, but you won't. And that also gets you into another company to be able to negotiate with, which is what makes the Big Ten so great, which I also think what makes the Big Ten great is the Big Ten is who they're with. They're with Fox and then CBS. CBS did lose their SEC distribution, but they picked up the Big Ten. But Fox is coming for ESPN. Fox wants to be the worldwide leader in sports. And that's why they're going West Coast, Midwest, East Coast, and hopefully eventually to the South. So there are different things that go to that. And the last part of it is there has been no consistency in conference pride, which is why Florida State never buys into a conference. Like, Mark, I'm half reading the comments. I see a lot of SEC pride. Have no problem with that. That's what it comes in, because there are people who will make comments like, look at Florida State, who barely beat Boston College, who got beat by Holy Cross the week before, but would say Bama is great, who barely beat Auburn, who got their asses beat by, was it New Mexico State?
Yes.
They paid them $750,000, if I'm correct, to come home and beat the hell out of them. Again, it's the pride, but it's the pride in the brand of the SEC. And Mark knows my argument. I say every week that I don't think the SEC is the best conference in football. But I don't think that there's ever been that fostering of that. So that's why you have to take sweetheart deals, because you don't even believe your conference is great, which is tough when the boss man doesn't believe that.
James and I are going to have that debate sometime during the off season. But let me make just one clarification here. And this is a slight defense for Commissioner Wofford here. And that's, and Tony, you can correct my numbers here. They're going to be very rough. When the ACC signed this grant of rights contract and the new TV deal, they were roughly, let's say, $32 million per team, and that is escalated per year. So they at least factored that into it, that they wanted a sliding scale, and they're up to about 39 million. Let's say the Big Ten was at 60 or 65 million, in the SEC in that range as well. Okay, let's understand that it wasn't just a bad deal because they didn't get the 60 million that the Big Ten was making, or the SEC, and they were relegated in the 30s. So while it was a bad deal, the ACC was never worth what the SEC or the Big Ten is in football. So they could have never negotiated fairly a deal that was anywhere close to those numbers anyway.
No,
in theory,
they don't have the television numbers that are anywhere close to those two conferences.
But you have the markets. You have Boston. You have the Boston market. You have the Charlotte market. You've got Florida. You've got New York with Syracuse. You have some of the largest television market. Like the Raiders works.
Games.
I hear you.
What would it have been in 2016 if they'd have signed a 4-year deal? What could they have signed in 2016 when you admit ACC was the best conference in the damn country? That's the
Alabama, Mark.
Being the best conference versus having the most popular conference. Those are two completely different things.
With the ACC is not, but the reality when you're signing these TV deals, nobody. Oh my goodness, I need that Tuscaloosa, Alabama market. That's not like they're signed the commercials. The commercials go for who's going to be in those areas. It's about the potential for the eyes to be able to see it. In the case of that, Florida State, hell, if that's the case, Tallahassee is actually one of the smaller markets in all of television, but it's one of the bigger brands. But when we go play Boston College, that's why that's why you want that Boston market. So when Tallahassee comes there, people are going to watch it and more eyes will be able to see it. That's even what they do at the NFL. That's why they argue against small market teams. Why do you think they keep putting the team in LA even though it keeps failing? Because it's a large market and they can get a bigger chunk of change, which is one of my arguments. When I cover the NFL, I love college. But every year I cover the NFL fans who say that's why this is a better product than college have a better leg to stand on each year. The NFL as a collective is when it was at $8 billion, it would have been the 15th largest gross domestic product of any country. It's because they stick together and they're in large television markets.
Absolutely. There's two easy reasons why the NFL is better than college football. Number one, the football is obviously tons better. That's not debatable. They're all pros. So the product on the field's better. And number two, yes, they're all working together. These conferences work separately. They work against each other. So
that's what I meant. Like the ACC doesn't work together. The SEC works closer to an NFL franchise than anybody else. But I'm saying the ACC, which is why, in my opinion, the Big Ten is expanding in the manner in which it is. They can command more money in the long run because you'll have the LA market. You'll have a Seattle market, which is pretty big. You'll have the Chicago market. You'll have every major market in television on top of having pretty good football. So when that next deal gets struck, it will be a landmark deal that will exponentially trump the SEC because they can command it. And the ACC had that. We just don't have the guys like at all negotiated. And what's crazy is the ACC started as one of the innovators in all of this. And I was playing under it. In 2004, when they went to go shift to go get Virginia Tech and Miami and expand is when they actually started talking about the super conference. I remember the ESPN article I read in my sports management class. The ACC went from being proactive to being complacent. And that's why we're in the situation we're in. They were straight up lazy. And you did a good deal at once, but the difference between the SEC and the Big Ten, they don't settle on one deal. The minute that they sign one, every year and a half, we're hearing about the next SEC deal. We're hearing about the next Big Ten deal, and we don't hear that with the ACC. We hear about a GOR, which they basically signed their own death warrant.
Let me throw something in there because this could wind up, and I don't want this to go in 20 different directions, which I realize I could take it there. But part of the challenge is we bring up, well, the NFL does it this way. Why don't the conferences do it? The NFL is one voice. The NFL has its management and is one voice in negotiating the TV contracts. You've got 4 conferences, and then, smaller conferences, but the 4 major conferences with their own issues, their own purposes, their own ulterior motives, and the commissioners who are, frankly, of different abilities and different background negotiating those. So it's a hard apples to apples comparison. No disrespect to Commissioner Phillips, but Greg Sankey is going to out negotiate him, 10 times out of 10. It just is that way. whether we like it or not, and I don't, but whether we like it or not, Greg Sankey is the primary power broker in college sports right now, in terms of on the school side, the conference side of things. So it's a different environment in which these contracts are getting negotiated. You're getting the best you can get, or at least the best you think you can get. And the ACC, and to Mark's point, yeah, Mark, you're right. They were never going to catch the SEC with this deal and the elevator clauses, but you hope to at least close the gap a little bit. And while the SEC was, running a marathon, the ACC was running a 5K. They were moving in small incremental steps, while the SEC financially was moving leaps and bounds. So look, I think when you talk about the Big Ten, and James and I went over this, what feels like 2 or 3 shows ago now, that the easiest environment would have been for Florida State to transition to the SEC because of that ESPN contract bridge, and ESPN could have smoothed the transformation. But now we're accusing ESPN of being in cahoots with the football playoff committee and making sure the SEC team gets in there. So that's not going to go anywhere, really. So you got to hope for the Big Ten. The upside to the Big Ten is this. Well, there are a couple of them. Their new TV contract brilliantly has escalator clauses for the addition of teams and different percentages based on who those teams are. Look, it was only 9 months ago, that once they added UCLA and USC, the conference was like, okay, we're done. We're not adding anyone else. We're good. But then what happened? 2-3 months later, after saying that, they had Oregon and Washington because Fox and the conference built in elevator clauses. So it was easy to get a yes from their membership within the Big Ten, because it wasn't going to cut into their piece of the pie. It was going to grow the pie for everybody. That's why the Big Ten doesn't care where they pull schools from. Got them from the West Coast, got them from the we got Rutgers out in New Jersey, we got Maryland. The only thing they don't have right now are teams in the South. They can add that easily through this. The SEC wears it as a badge of honor that all their states connect on the map. Literally, the borders connect. So here's our footprint, and it's geographically logical. The Big Ten don't care. We're down to 2 power conferences. We're gonna play big ball and force the SEC's hand. And so that is what Florida State has working for it, with a potential move to the Big Ten. There are escalator clauses in the TV contract, and the fact that the Big Ten is not hung up on geographics.
I just want to make one point real quick, because you guys brought up great arguments, and you're right about the ACC and John Swofford and that deal they made back then. But I just want to make it clear, everybody that followed Florida State and the ACC back then, it was a controversial thing when it happened. Mm-hmm. Everybody knew. If you followed anybody that was covering Florida State or any of these big ACC, we all knew it was going to be, done in a couple of years. And even at that time, it was like $7 or $8 million behind. And there was a lot of things tied up in that thing with Raycom and that whole Tobacco Road thing in ACC. So it was just, you're right. That deal, that was it. Signing that 20-year deal, that was the nail in the coffin. And in my opinion, Jim Phillips is just a lame duck. They brought in kind of like Baylor brought in Jim Grove to kind of settle things in until they could move on to the next stage of their, kind of program. So that's how I see it. But I agree with what you're saying, but it's like, that's kind of what me and James are saying. It's like, it's just total incompetence. And that language is in the green right. So we hope that can get us where we want to go.
Go Blue 982. Appreciate the contribution. Late to the party. So if you mentioned it, sorry. The 12-team playoff, I believe he's talking about here, will still favor the SEC. Slots 5 through 8 will be SEC. So they get all the home games. Big 10 and Big 12 need to start their own thing. Big 10, Big 12 need to start their own thing without SEC and ESPN. So Go Blue, appreciate the contribution. A few things wrong with your comment there. Number one, the Big Ten has no affiliation currently with ESPN, ABC, Disney. That ended since they first started broadcasting college football games back in 1966. So for the first time ever, the Big Ten not associated with them anyway. And the Big Ten actually is going to be making more money, already is making more money than the SEC. So I don't know why you're clumping the Big Ten in with the Big 12. It's more like the SEC and the Big 10. As James mentioned, if you look at the 12 teams that are currently ranked, let's say 1 through 11, tack on the group of 5 and project that forward to 2024. And it's not like it's going to happen like this every year, but it's going to be damn close, is that the SEC and the Big Ten are going to dominate this playoff, depending on how the committee perceives these teams. And I don't expect them to perceive them much differently than they already do. Plus, you add Texas, Oklahoma to the SEC, and you add Washington, Oregon, USC, and UCLA to the Big Ten. Yikes. It's going to be a 2-conference dominated playoff, although all the conferences are guaranteed a spot.
Right.
I think with that, if that person's argument was this, the college football playoff, the games are on ESPN.
Oh, okay.
So
I even think that's going to change. I don't know where we stand on that, but
I think they're saying a whole new playoff is what they're saying.
Hang on though. The playoff games are split when it goes to the 12 teams.
Yeah.
The playoff games are split between Fox and ESPN. ESPN will no longer have a monopoly on all of the college football playoffs. That was part of the reason why the Big Ten put in some of the mandates they did, because they wanted to make sure Fox got a seat at the table when it came to the 12, which again was part of the reason why Commissioners Warren and Phillips and Kleofkoff, did what they did in pushing back the vote and pushing back the 12-team expansion to next year, because the Big Ten would then be under a Fox contract.
And why you had to have 2 SEC and 2 Big Ten teams in this playoff and get those damn ratings, because this deal's up for the negotiation table as well.
It says the ESPN contract goes through 2025.
It does, but it's not an exclusive contract.
Okay, so this will be
this is the last year it's ESPN exclusive.
But even with that, I think it's the next step is this. It's again, there is literally what we tried to accomplish with the BCS and what we said we wanted to accomplish with the playoff. We eventually went back to a more slightly dignified form of what we had before that. It is an invitational, but before the playoff, the champion was picked based upon people's criteria and what they felt. It was not one on the football field. And right now, if this is just a jazzy up way of saying these are the 4 teams that we feel is not on the foot, which is again why the NFL is better, because you play the game. Doesn't matter who's the quarterback. It doesn't matter what happens. The best team, like you're still going to be the conference champion. If you're the best team in the AFC, they don't move you to a wild card because you lost your quarterback. You play the games.
You can't do it in college football, and I'm sorry. I know nobody in the ACC or the SEC wants to hear this, but until y'all start playing 9 conference games and everybody plays 9 conference games, you can't have that equal opportunity like the NFL does.
Can't have that argument with FSU though, with their out of conference schedule.
I agree with
the non-conference the conference.
But what I'm saying is, if you're going to compare it to the NFL's all running one schedule.
Yeah, for sure.
The ACC has its thing, and the SEC with their, and Mark knows I get on my soapbox about this.
They should play 9.
You're playing some directional school in week 11 of the season, Charleston Southern Academy. Stop doing that.
I want to push back on that a little bit.
Go ahead.
We do have divisions. We have 5 of them.
Well, yeah.
We have, and historically, if you win your division and you're one of the better teams, you're in. Just like right now, all the Jaguars have to do is win the AFC South, be the best team in the AFC South, and they get an opportunity to play for the Lombardi Trophy. As bad as they can be, If they're better than the teams in the AFC South, they get an opportunity, a fair opportunity.
Well, what we were saying a second ago, James, I completely agree with you in that Florida State, this situation is the most egregious of the we just select whoever we want.
Yeah.
But I can go through every year and I can make a case for a team or two to say their resumes just as good as a team that got selected. There's objective criteria that they choose to use in different situations concerning different situations and different teams and scenarios. This is just the most egregious. Nothing's really changed.
Right. And it's going to be objective criteria as long as there is no formula that each conference plays under. When the Big Ten is playing 9 conference games and 3 out of conference games, and the SEC is throwing in a 4th out of conference game in the middle of November when everyone else is fighting for their conference championship, and all of these things happen, there is no one formula that fits until you get one system.
So if I could just extend on that scheduling thought, and then I'll cut James loose here. If you're going to go in that direction, and I've made proposals all over the place, videos are all over the place. If you're going to even out the number of conference games, which I completely agree with, you also have to address non-conference scheduling, because there's a complete disparity in the approach that Florida State takes in saying, we got this rival Florida. They could be no good one year, but they could be one of the 10 best teams in the country a lot of the time. So we already play that difficult game. Then we're going to go out and schedule another game, whether that's LSU or somebody else. And then Baylor has not played an out-of-conference game against a ranked team since 1997 because they choose to play Rice and Lamar and Sam Houston State and whoever. So that's completely screwed up too. There needs to be a formula to address non-conference scheduling as well.
Preach it, brother Mark. I agree, man.
I just could not say any better for my case against the SEC than what you just did, Mark.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
My point with it is that when
they schedule pretty tough, but go ahead.
It
depends on the team.
Like I'm saying, not in comparison to the top guys right now. Like I can't. LSU has the Heisman Trophy winner, and we shut him down. Obviously, we had Jay Trapp, but he was shut down. Then we scheduled Florida. It's not our fault. Florida sucks. Like we didn't. Well, I mean, we kind of predicted it, and we say it, but it's kind of a troll more than anything else. I was praying they'd be better, but I say this: if it's worked until the situation presented itself for it to show how perfect it is. And then when we had the opportunity, what we did was we chose to go with what we've consistently known. What we know is an SEC team to be in there. Be honest with you, it'd be just as much bitching and moaning if Alabama, which would have been a better argument, would have been left out and Texas would have been in. Or if Texas would have been left out and Bama would have been put in. Because those are the guys because the only reason Florida State's bumped out, and this is what I wish they would just say. We had to put Bama in because they beat Georgia, but we couldn't put Bama in if we don't put Texas in, who beat them by 10 points at home.
Right.
All you got to do is tell the truth. Just tell the truth, and then people will be like, you know what? I don't like it. I don't agree with it. It sucks, but at least you didn't make me feel like I'm going crazy.
And just say, if Georgia had not lost, Florida State would be in.
That would be perfect. We have to have it. We've had an SEC school damn near every year. We've had the BCS in the playoff. We can't not have it this year with it being one of the more competitive conferences. I'm not even going to hold you with that. But we could not justify putting the SEC school in and not putting the school that, because head-to-head has to mean for something. It has to stand for something, right? Like when the games are played, you have to be able to
I just don't see why the ACC doesn't get credit for all their titles. I don't get it. Like if you're gonna say they're second to the SEC, that's fine. But they're treated like they're the fifth, like they treat they're a group of 5 team, and it's like you got 3 of the last 10. It's just infuriating. It is what it is. It's like they got the SEC team in there. That's what they're gonna do no matter what.
I would hope that the committee isn't taking anybody's titles into consideration because those are separate football seasons. I would hope that they're just evaluating this football season based on this football season.
Well,
that's what I would.
Unfortunately, they're not.
But
you're right.
I hope that Texas wins. I hope Texas wins. or even Bama wins. And somehow, again, I'm not gonna, like, normally when I'm confident, I'll bet, but I don't have the confidence to bet to bet this because I don't know who's playing in this game.
That's the problem.
I hope that somehow Florida State ekes out a win against Miami. I mean, in Miami against Georgia. And I hope for more anarchy. I hope the AP, even if the AP or the coaches poll don't give it to them, I hope there is a significant amount of number one votes that go in the direction that Florida State's undefeated. So that we'll be talking about this mess the rest of the summer. and more people will be just to keep fanning the flames, and then to have people say that this is why you play the games on the football field
James,
and not in the boardroom.
I don't know if you hold us here at the Voice of College Football, and me in particular, in this high of regard, but we review all the national championships, and I will tell you right now that if Florida State's undefeated, and regardless if anybody else is undefeated, they will have earned a Voice of College Football national championship.
We'll take the UCF. Yours would be the only one to count. Don't give me pro football writers who have left arm, who write with their left hands, coaches poll. Like, don't give me that. Oh, my bad. I did not mean. I am not trying to say
too, buddy. I'm left-handed too.
I just put a random. I was trying to say the most random thing that I could say, like UCF said. Like,
it's 50-50 now.
But if the AP, the coaches poll, or Mark Rogers poll says we're the national champion, and damn it, I'm making rings.
Did y'all talk about Kirk Herbstreit's unhinged rant today yet? Oh, my goodness.
Oh, yeah.
We touched on it a bit, but didn't dissect it.
The fact that came out and he made a few Freudian slips in there, because he admitted that they all think Oregon and Georgia are better teams than Florida State. So why are we ahead of them?
Florida State should, based upon the College Football Playoff Committee's thought process, Florida State should be 7th, I think. Should be ranked 7th.
Exactly.
If all of those things are to be true. The one-loss teams, like, you can't put them in front of them. We're not going to put a 2-loss team in front of them.
So is 5 through 25 most deserving? Only 1 through 4 is the best 4? Is that what it is? And then 5 through 25 is the most deserving? Because that's basically what they've done.
Honestly, when you look at the top 25, I think once they got past number 5 or 6, they frankly stopped paying much attention and just put it in.
Though, as hell.
Because there's a lot of teams in the wrong place in the final top 25. It feels like they stopped paying significant attention at that point, But I mean, Oregon, look, Oregon's really good. They lost 2 games this year by a grand total of 6 points. They're going to get whacked in their bowl game because here's your irrational stat of the day, Mark. The Pac-12 runner-up, the team that has lost the conference championship game, is 0-11 in bowl games after losing the conference championship game.
I need to write that one down.
Who are they playing?
I don't even remember.
Liberty. They're playing Liberty.
There you
go. That's really going to put that to the test.
That's a trap game.
With Bo Nix playing in the game.
Yeah, Bo Nix
is playing.
Yes, he is.
Wow. Liberty's undefeated, right?
They are.
But they haven't played anybody.
Against the worst schedule in college football.
Yeah. They do. It's not their fault, but I always just say this too. They do. I am going to agree with that. If it is so difficult to win a football game in college football, let alone 13 in a row. Like, it's why so few teams have ever done it. It's just that's the other side. I'm like, if it was so easy to go undefeated, the teams that we're arguing about would have done it. Like, Oklahoma beat Texas, which I don't think Texas. I think Oklahoma's better than Texas, and but it's just crazy because any given time, especially in rivalry games, those things can happen. Alabama is won 12 games, skirted through a lot of games. Excuse me, they're 12-1. Yeah, 12-1. They skirted through some. South Florida, though the elements were against them. South Florida held them, gave them a pretty tough go. I don't think that South Florida is a better team than Alabama. It's just the beauty of sport, and this is why you play it. Because even North Alabama, right? We talked about that game and how it was a struggle in the first quarter. But if you actually watch the game, it was some wild stuff that just doesn't make football sense. And kudos to their coach for having the balls to do that. Like 4th and forever, you fake a punt on your own 20 inside of your own 30. Like
Right.
nobody's game planning for that. But kudos to him for doing that. Like that was ballsy. You have nothing to lose. I give him that. I tell people when I played my senior year, we beat Miami after Labor Day. We played Citadel. I believe the game, it was 13-10 going into halftime against Citadel. We won 60-something to 10. Like we know the game is going to eventually correct itself, but it's why you have to play it. Like you don't get to say, oh, well, that's just Citadel. Well, Citadel was kicking our ass for a second there until we woke up and decided that we wanted to beat. That's how you lose. That's how Florida State loses to Jacksonville State. That's how Miami in 1979 loses to FAMU at Doak Campbell Stadium 2 weeks after they lost to Florida State in Doak Campbell Stadium. They're the only team to lose twice in Doak Campbell Stadium in the same year. It's why Florida loses to Georgia Southern without Georgia Southern competing a pass. Like it's why App State beats Michigan. It's the games the game was meant the reason why I love football and I can watch it all day. Even right now watching bad football down here in I don't know where the hell I am in Florida, but my son's playing in some Pop Warner mess that I paid exponential amounts of money for him and his team to come and lose. But they were one of the top teams in this. And they've lost every freaking game because you got to play the games. And that's what makes the game beautiful. But, that's why, again, that's really why like the purist in me would be like, you know what? Let's not change it this year. Like, that's why you expanded it to 12 games so that the one-loss teams that you should argue to get in, for them to get in. But I'm also for anarchy. I also like anarchy. So shout out to our attorney general, and I learned something from you. All other attorneys generals,
there you go,
who are going out and suing, and maybe we'll take down the NCAA, and we will bring in a more perfect product because there's really only 50 teams that deserve to be in Power 5 that really have a chance to win. If we're being honest.
I serve no other purpose, I got the good grammar in.
Yes, the Florida Gator herself going to bat for FSU. All right, great show, guys. Tony Siracusa, last word on college football. Tony, thank you so much for spending your time here. Let folks know where they can find you and what's going on there at Last Word on College Football.
Yeah, we got lastwordonsports.com. You go to the college football link. We are covering all 42 bowl games. We started with the previews today for this weekend's games. We have our writers on a preview of every single bowl game. So that's what you'll find there, including the Bahamas Bowl, which I will point out is being played in Charlotte, North Carolina this year. I will be there Monday afternoon for that.
Talk about the short end of the stick.
Exactly. So
is it still Popeyes? At least is it still sponsored by Popeyes?
No, now it's sponsored by the famous Toastery Diner and Restaurant of the greater Charlotte area. So
you're not joking about that either.
No, I'm not.
No.
So we are covering everything, and you can find us on Twitter, and you can find me as you just put there at Tony Bruin on Twitter or X or whatever.
Are y'all covering the Bad Boys for Life Bowl? Where Puff Daddy's Bowl with Miami's playing in?
No, we're not doing
in New York.
We're not doing that one.
I think it's the Bad Boy More or something like that. Something with Bad Boys.
Thank you for the disrespect. I love it.
George, what's going on there at the Renegade Report?
Man, we're killing it right now. We're closing in on 1,000 subscriptions, so y'all get over there and subscribe. I'm actually going on a show with Jackson Johnson of the Jacksonian after this show. Friday, we have our live stream. It'll probably be around 7:38. We don't have a guest. It'll probably just me and Jen unless something comes up. But Sunday at 12 Eastern, we have Zach Smith from the Menace to Sports podcast coming on. So make sure y'all check that one out for sure.
All right.
And it's the Renegade Report, just like he's got it there on the screen.
Nice. Well, we talk to Zach on a pretty regular basis, so he'll give you some good stuff for sure.
Super excited about that one for sure.
James.
Den Media Group, we're closing in on. We're trying to get to this 4,000 mark. Once we get to 4,000, listen, I don't care if you listen to the show. I just need 4,000 subs. Once we get to 4,000 subs, we give away $400 live on the show, and we give away however many likes we have while we're live on that show. So like today's show, we would have given one person $400 and another person would have got $130 that we would have done. It's Christmas time. If you're like me, you spend a lot of money. You spend way more money on gifts than you would like to. This could be something for you. Don't care how you get it done, but just all you got to do is go push the subscribe. I would like for you to listen or watch, but I really more so care about the subs. That's what my sponsors like to see. The 4,000, and then that looks very fancy. So we're doing that, and what we do with the money and the revenues that we make off the YouTube channel, we do a ton of stuff in the community. Right now, we're doing my gifts for good grades. I just went and spent about $1,000 for some gifts in Tallahassee. I drive over on Friday. We got 5 elementary schools that we're going to and giving kids who did good in the classroom academically and with their civil obedience. We are giving them a $30 Christmas gift. And then we do Jacksonville next week, and I do the purchase of those over the weekend or something. But if you would like to make a donation, you can go to mftkfoundation.com, and there's a donate. You can go click that and, try to get people in the holiday spirit, even though it seems like Santa's giving a lot of you people in the comments some coal. Just to let you know that.
Y'all go watch Big Game BS. Don't listen to him. Y'all go watch it. He's a lot of fun in the morning, man. Y'all go hang out with James.
Tony, George, James, appreciate you making this happen. Everyone make it on back next Wednesday, 6 p.m. Eastern.
All right, guys, have a good